Hello, welcome back to the Twin Cities Fencing Club channel. My name is Aslan. Today we're going to be talking about agility and plyometrics. So today's workout isn't necessarily going to be a step-by-step workout. It's going to be a little bit more of a guide to give you some general ideas, just because agility and plyometrics have so many different exercises and variations you can do. It sometimes feels a bit limitless. So this is just to give you kind of an understanding and a starting point for building your own exercise workout at home using agility and plyometrics. So the first thing is, what is agility and plyometrics? Agility is, as I have written out here, moving efficiently using a variety of skills, including balance, coordination, speed, strength as well. It's a little bit of everything, but it's, getting from point A to point B quickly, efficiently, and with good stability. Plyometrics is also known as jump training. Usually you're doing small jumps or high jumps, but whatever you're doing, you're trying to exert a maximum amount of force for every time you complete a jump. So some examples of these exercises for agility: ladders, either a ladder that's taped out on the floor or those roll-out ones you can get, or following patterns and circuits that have been laid out with cones or really any other obstacle. Kind of the sky's the limit here. Ladders and other cones or obstacles provide a pretty malleable framework to set up an agility exercise. So the good news is that if you're doing this at home, it's super easy to grab whatever obstacles, markers, balls you have at home and just lay out a pattern on your floor. For examples of plyometric exercises, lateral small jumps like side-to-side jumps or forward-backwards, if you're doing them over a marked line, are the really basic ones that are still super good to do. The more difficult ones we sometimes think of are like box jumps. So when you have a box, it might be 2 feet high or a foot high and you're jumping onto that with both feet. That can be a fair bit harder. In terms of setting this up at home, usually doing more lateral jumps or over a low surface is a bit easier to set up. Unless you already have a plyo box at home, I would not recommend trying to jump onto a chair or anything. In my case, as you'll see later in the video, I set up a blade that I could jump over, because if I don't jump it correctly and I catch the blade, nothing bad is going to happen. The blade will just get knocked off the chair. So now we get to the really important part, which is, what do you want to think about when you're setting up these exercises and doing them at home? And you don't have someone who's just sort of feeding the exercise to you. First of all, technique is really, really important before anything else. You always want to make sure you have clear examples of the piece of footwork or exercise you're trying to do, and that you take the time to get the technique correct. So go slowly. Make sure you're landing your feet in the correct place. Take your time to make sure the form is good and you're not going to injure yourself. Next up then is precision and accuracy. And these two terms really just boil down to, can you execute the piece of footwork in the same spot with consistent technique over and over again without straying or getting sloppy, which is easier said than done sometimes, especially if you're learning a new exercise. But it's really important to emphasize this sort of detail, because eventually you want to get to the point where you can perform some of these exercises and not have to look at your feet all the time, having to check where they're going with every step. And this very much applies to footwork as well. When you're fencing, we don't spend all of our time looking at our feet, because we trust our feet are going to be in the place we need them to be, because we've practiced the technique, we've practiced having good execution, we know exactly where each step is going to place us. Lastly, what should come really last in any exercise you're learning for the first time, is speed and then general difficulty. Once you've mastered being able to do the technique correctly and you can replicate it, as we talked about, accurately, and you can do it over and over again, it'll look the same every time, then you can start to increase the speed and challenge yourself by going faster while still maintaining good technique. If your technique goes out the window the moment you try to go faster, that's a sign you need to back off and keep practicing the technique by itself until that's a bit more ingrained. In terms of general difficulty, you can always add more markers. You can make the obstacle course longer. You can make your intervals longer if you're doing these for a timed period. There are any number of ways you can make these exercises more difficult, as long as you've spent the time getting the basics done correctly. For most of these exercises, you're going to want some kind of a straight line reference on the ground. So in this case, I'm just using an epee that I have. A piece of rope or tape will also work just as well. I'm doing these barefoot because I'm on a soft carpeted floor and I'm actually probably likely to slip if I wear shoes. But if you're on a hardwood floor or any other hard surface outside or even on grass, you probably should wear some sneakers while you're doing these exercises. The first exercise we're doing is just a step forward and backward over the line. And you can see here I'm starting out nice and slow, then I get a little bit faster as I get more comfortable, but I'm trying to make sure I clear the line every single time and I'm not touching the blade. It's a very simple exercise and a really good one to start with, no matter what sort of agility or plyometric workout you're doing. Just gives you a chance to warm up, kind of get your bearings, and get your heart rate up a little bit more. By the time you get to the third set, if you're feeling more comfortable with the technique and you're not tripping up on your line too much, then you can definitely increase the speed a bit. What goes with this is make sure you're picking up your knees a little more, you can get your arms engaged a bit more. It doesn't have to just be about trying to move your feet as fast as possible. This can be a whole body workout. An important consideration when building this type of workout is directionality. So if you're doing a set of exercises like our first one where you're going forwards and backwards, you want to try and complement it with a set of exercises where you're working on going side to side. Just because this works out a different set of muscles or the same group of muscles in a slightly different way, you want to get that flexibility. This particular sideways stepping exercise I sort of just made up on the fly, and it's kind of a great example of I wanted to do an exercise that was side to side. I wanted to have a little bit of difficulty with an obstacle. Obviously, it's not perfect, but it gets the job done, and I try to work on my consistency and my technique as I go. Just as an example of a type of variation you can do, instead of just stepping in and out, you can do sort of a happy feet or drumming and then just throw in a little bit of a tap out over the line with one foot at a time. And though it looks like it's really close, I'm trying to clear the line every time and just do a really light tap with my foot and keep right on going. Now that you've got an idea of some simple agility exercises that are in place, we can move on to some plyometric exercises that are in place. So I'm still using a line as my reference guide, and then sort of similar to earlier, I'm clearing the line back and forth, but I'm jumping up and swapping my feet. The goal here is not to jump towards the ceiling, but to generate a consistent and still powerful amount of push from every jump you make, so it should be deliberate, consistent, and a strong but small jump. Following that, since I did a forward-backwards exercise, I wanted to complement it with a side-to-side jumping exercise. So this is just a really easy side-to-side jump. You want to try and keep your feet reasonably tucked together, have a bit of a bend in your knees so that you're stabilizing and absorbing the impact properly. As with all the other exercises, make sure you're clearing your obstacle every time, and if you're having a harder time, go a little bit slower and get the technique right. By this point, I was starting to feel pretty creative and my knees, my ankles were well warmed up, so I decided to try some height jumps. Not a very high height, but still challenging enough, and then I'm using a chair and a blade, so that way if I catch the blade, it'll get knocked off the chair and I don't risk injuring myself by trying to jump onto something or over something that won't move. And in this case, just simple two-footed jump, clearing the blade every time, trying to keep my knees tucked together, my feet tucked together, and then really bending with the jump and then bending with the land. Here are a couple extra just so you get an idea of what it should look like from the side. For our last agility exercise, we are going to go into a slightly different direction. This is a great moment if you have any cones or like I'm using tennis balls, really anything that'll be a good obstacle that hopefully you won't stub your toe on if you accidentally run into it. If you have anything like that, you can go get those. And then in my case, I just set them up as a square that is relatively even. Rectangle is also fine. Depends on how picky you are about your squares. And then I'm just doing a small shuffling set of footwork to go around the edges of the square. So I'm trying to keep my steps small and my transitions quick as much as I can. Otherwise, you can do diagonal patterns, extra loops around your obstacles, pretty much whatever you want to do to change it up. Finally, and this part is optional, I'm just doing a little bit of strength training exercises to wrap up. These are called knee extensions, and it is what it sounds like and what it looks like. You are extending your knee until your leg is straight. The important thing here is to emphasize using the muscles that are above where your kneecap is located, so we want to focus on contracting those muscles to straighten your leg. This is a really great exercise to help strengthen the muscles around your knee, as is obvious, especially if you're someone like me and you have some knee problems and your knees are cranky. The very last exercise are some simple calf raises. You can do these against a wall or on a stair ledge or just flat on the floor like I'm doing, just to get a little bit of an extra workout to your calf muscles, which by this point should be pretty tired. So that concludes our video on agility and plyometrics. It's a very basic framework to get you started. If you're looking for more variations, you can very easily make up your own or find more out on the internet. As always, make sure you finish up your workout with some basic stretching. And if you have any additional comments or feedback or ideas or things you'd like me to talk about or demonstrate, please let me know. You can leave a comment below or reach out to me directly. So thanks for watching again, and we will see you for the next workout. Bye!